Good evening and welcome to Udk Tuesday number 255. We're very, very happy to welcome all of you, as well as everybody watching online. Just a quick reminder, we are just as interested in the lecture as discussing it afterwards with you. So if you have any questions afterwards, just raise your hand and perhaps stand up while you ask the question, because we have the live stream and it's always nice to see who's asking. And then we will hand you the microphone and then you can ask your question, which will hopefully be answered also. Also online, you can ask questions either in the YouTube live chat or on our Telegram channel. So make sure to write if you have anything to ask. We are extremely happy to have Artem Kitaev on behalf of KOSMOS Architects join us for a lecture on their work. Before diving in, I would like to introduce you and your practice a bit further. You studied in Moscow at the College of Art and Architecture Management, the Academic Art Lyceum at the Academy of Arts, as well as the Architectural Institute, where you finished both your bachelor's and master's degree. Currently, you are a PhD candidate at TU Wien, where you also work as a guest professor, leading your own design studio, as you do in Geneva at the same time. You have hosted workshops and given lectures in so many instances that on your CV, those very long lists that consist of 54 mentions simply end with the two little words, and more. We hope we will get a mention. You began your architectural practice with the office Meganum in Moscow before joining Herzog & de Meuron in Basel and eventually founding your own office alongside Leonid Sulimsky in 2012, KOSMOS Architects. Your design works have a pretty impressive range in scale, as you yourself write on your website, from a door handle to a city plan, to quote yourself to you. What I found to be remarkable additionally is the casualness in which you treat time axes across your practice. You reconstruct a 100-year-old farmhouse in great sensitivity in accordance to its characteristics and history, and then develop a utopian artificial garden, Petrichor C4, for Lausanne Jardins 24. In looking at your practice, your interior design, your speculative urbanism, your dwellings, your art exhibitions, and your academic work, the notions of yesterday and tomorrow culminate in a somewhat unclear notion of today, which is developed with utter care, freshness, and a bit of humor. This endeavor is quite a pleasure to follow from afar, but even better up close, which is why I will now sit down and let you show and explain to us the core of your work. So thank you for being here and sharing your views and ideas with us.
Thank you. Do you hear me well, or should I come closer? Do I need a microphone here? Well, thanks very much for such a comprehensive introduction. Now at least I know that someone, at least one person who actually reads CVs and, and calculate all the lines in there. Well, it's a pleasure to be here. And I thank you for inviting. After pouring a glass of water, I will start. So my name is Artem Kitaev, and I'm a founding partner, co-founding partner, together with Leonid Sulimsky. We found KOSMOS Architects more than, 11 years ago. And the KOSMOS is a collective which brings architects from different countries to work on projects of different scales and type, and not only projects, but also publications and research. And we purposely foster this diversity of types of projects we work on, and we believe it's a special, very important expertise for the nowadays and probably even for the future to be able to connect different scales and different types of architectural work. And today's discussion, I would like to start with the image, our image of the future. And this painting of ideal city brings us or reveals for us understanding of Renaissance understanding of ideal city. So we could see here beautiful perspectives, square colonnades and windows carefully assembled in beautiful ensemble. One beautiful project, and the only thing which we miss here, it's understanding of the place or history of the place, what actually was here before, and it's difficult to trace the history of development, of achievement of such a beautiful ensemble. later in this engraving, offering us another vision of the future. We could see, again, inspiring atmosphere of technology and architecture where beautiful facades aligned in one ensemble. And again, we're lacking to detect the development of the site and what was here before. Like it was installed at once as one project. Or the other project of the future, which also propose strong control and a great understanding of these future plans and what happens when such a project, such an idea, such a concept doesn't fulfill 100% the requirements of us. We have only one, the most efficient and solution to free up the space for the new bright future, demolition and new construction. And in this new future, ecological and green, with a great diversity of architectural approaches and styles and designs, one thing in this diversity remain common. They all still lose connection with reality, with the context, with the surrounding, with the place we actually grew from. They again offer us clean, beautiful image of the future without really explaining how do we achieve this future, how do we come there. And this new image hardly related to the existing resources on the site. So the current organization of the construction industry, it's extraction, construction, and demolition. Very linear, very efficient, till certain limit process. But what do we do when all the resources exhausted, or most of them exhausted, or they're just not affordable anymore? What should be the role of the architect in such a configuration? And here, probably it's the moment when we can try to question the role of architect or imagine transformation of the architect from chief builder to chief curator. Architect, archi from the main or chief, and tect, builder or constructor. So it's the person who creates spaces, designs and builds new spaces. But probably it's the time to see the role of ours more as a curator of spaces, to find possibility to adapt existing spaces and structures to new needs and requirements, but not only spaces, as well as materials and resources. Any construction, any demolition is every time a great resource for the new construction, and we just not allowed to waste these resources. The careful evaluation of the values of existing structure, of the values of the resources, of their potential in the cycle of the construction is our absolute, it's something what we don't have right anymore to avoid or to skip or give to the other occupations or experts. Assembly should be looped, should be cycled with the disassembly through reuse and repair. It should be one inevitable circle with a circular use of the resources, where each action, each new facility continues the process of disassembly. So each old becomes new, and each new should bear in mind at a certain moment it should become old and again be reused. So we have to implement these processes of future disassembly and design for disassembly in a way. And I would like to illustrate these thirds with several projects. And the first project which we have done, which I will show today, it's a project called New Order. We did it for Swiss Art and Design Awards in 2017. And in this project, we try to work with materials which normally, which often get unmentioned by architects or even ignored by architects, but they would inevitably appear in architectural design and urban space. I'm speaking here about regulation cones, anti-bird spikes, different protections. To conceptualize it's the materials and elements which protects buildings from people or animals or protects people from being hurt by buildings and structures. We try to see how we could work with this material unconventionally, to rethink the way they could be used, and for example, to use non-structural materials as an element of the structure, trying to understand where lies the potential of using them in a very new way or unexpected way, or even probably a wrong way, but also trying to discover a beauty of sharp and soft, bright and gray. And the next project called Permanently Temporary, it was a competition for a pavilion in Barcelona, which we won today with the Parabase architectural office. And this project dedicated to materials excluded from the construction circle. And again, any construction based on the extraction of natural resources, unrenewable resources. And we thought, what if we look a bit closer and look at the materials which are already available for us? And any contemporary city is a city which undergoes constantly transformation, which release a lot of spare materials, which then just happen to be somewhere stored or left around the cities, or just placed temporary or for the future, for dilapidation or decay. And to us was very interesting how some materials which we even don't have a strategy to reuse, how they could be again brought back in the cycle of the construction and could be used for creation of facilities. Sometimes they get stuck behind the columns or stored under the sheds, and they are absolutely diverse in scale, in geometry. We were honored or granted access to different storages in Barcelona, where we could find pretty much everything, starting from heritage sculptures, particular beauty. Sometimes they're placed in extraordinary spaces. I mean, I also cannot not reflect it as an architect. Also very inspiring spaces, but with a controlled access, so actually no one even can get in there. And diversity of materials stored somewhere, preserved for this integration, the construction circle is great. Like, for example, here we could see doors of Sagrada Familia just stored somewhere in one of these garages in the outskirts, or elements of Enrique Miralles Stadium just placed in the field behind the sports grounds. And when we speak about reuse doesn't mean use everything what you have. Reuse is not a patchwork of all accessible materials. Reuse is a careful selection of an assembly of the materials, of accessible, available materials in one composition. So we have decided to select mineral materials for the temporary installation, which normally are not used for this, carefully place them on the side and cover them with a debris netting to unite in one form. And that's how pavilion open its, well, it's not doors, it's actually fixed tunnel elements, but indicated the main entrance, which is supposed to invite inside the visitors. And from the other side, we have invited with the other main character of the pavilion. And to us was important to create a space which would allow to set a dialogue through the exhibitions and different workshops about the meaning of the materials in the contemporary organization of the construction. And we spoke not only about construction materials, but also about heritage. And what is the role of the heritage in the construction? Is it just untouchable monuments, or could we see some of them as spolia, being again integrated in the cycle of the construction and bringing us not only visual pleasure, but also probably some practical meaning of the structures? So the pavilion happened to be quite a active public space over the day and in the evening and over the night for people, and not only keep twinkling with Akbar Tower by Jean Nouvel. And when we were building this material, this pavilion, to us was very important to pose the main question about temporality of permanent, how temporary this pavilion should be, or how permanent temporary pavilion should be. And this combination of temporary and permanent in the pavilion, we also decided to unpack through the method of the construction. So to us, we built this pavilion that way that we would be able to disassemble it without damaging any of the materials, because also all the materials were rented and we had to pay even deposit, and we want to have this deposit back. So we were very careful about the materials. And for example, even the debris netting, we have decided to roll, and by rolling the material, you reveal additional quality of the material, so it becomes strong. And actually, we didn't use any straps. We just pulled the same fabric all around the stacked on top of each other elements. And we fix all the other elements also in such a way that we would be able to disassemble it without damaging any of the materials. And even the seats were made out of these asphalt blocks, also that way that we wouldn't be damaging asphalt blocks. And afterwards, the material was disassembled and returned to the storages, and we made again all the materials available for the construction and further reuse. The other project of a different scale, but dedicated to the same question, it's called Stadthotel Trimli. It was a competition in Zurich to reuse 3 identical dormitory buildings, which we have won. So these 3 identical buildings have been built in 1967. And back then, it was used quite a progressive technology of prefabricated structural walls, which allowed to assemble this building quite fast, but also which have created this rather efficient and rather dense cells of the building. But on the other hand, this type of organization structure of the building didn't allow for easy adaptation, transformation of the structure. And it's interesting that, and because of that, City of Zurich have decided to demolish the building, even though the building was hopefully in perfect conditions. So you could see like perfect concrete or this enfilades of rooms. Everything is even clear and ready to move in, but doesn't comply with the current regulations. And to us was interesting to showcase in these 3 different buildings, 3 identical buildings, different scenarios, what we can do with such an existing structures to adapt them to the new requirements. So we have come up with a concept, hardware, software, and architecture, the meaning of which is to divide architecture, to design architecture for change, to divide from the very beginning in 2 parts. Hardware, it's a flexible, open, load-bearing structure, generally structure, and the software, it's this adjustable infill, which allows us to adapt the structure to new programs and new requirements. So the first step which we have done, we brought this structure to the this kind of universal open mode, which would allow the integration of different programs. And then we introduced 3 scenarios for each of the towers. The days, for example, for a short-term stay, like hotels, where all the adjustment would be done by furniture only. Months, it's like a seasonal living or students accommodation, where different temporary structures could allow to adjust to enhance the structure and to provide additional amenities for such a structure. And years, it's where we would intervene with a load-bearing structure. So it's for long-term stay, for a housing, for example. So here you could see these 3 scenarios: furniture, temporary structures from the outside, and a transformation of load-bearing structure. And that's how these scenarios look like. So on the left, you could see different layouts of furniture, different new amenities on the outside for the month scenario with it delivered by the temporary structure, and years when we open up the existing load-bearing structure, enriching diversity of spatial conditions of the space. And of course, all three types of interventions had its own difference and different expression on the facade. And here we could see three scenarios: years, months, and days, which offers three additional strategies to work with such structures in a different extent of time. Crevasse. It is the project, the competition of renovation of Contemporary Art Museum in Geneva, which we have done together with Jan de Wilde and Inge Wink Architects. And this building, this industrial building, built in in the end of 20s of 20th century, actually consists of two parts, which have been built with a difference of 5 years, and it hosts now two institutions. And these two institutions, so the building occupies the western side of the city block, and that's how it looks now. What's also interesting that it has a back facade and a connection with the courtyard, which also could be or has a potential to be used as a public space. And what is interesting about these two institutions, they technically don't share much more in common as the building. And more than that, they both lack an identity of this building. So it's not even so clear where's the main entrance or how to enter which of the institution. So that was one of the main challenges of the competition. And to us was interesting to find this joint, this place where we could reveal or we could intervene in order to reveal this identity. And sometimes to improve situation doesn't mean to build new, but it means to extract. So similar to the actions of Luigi Fontana, who released the energy of the canvas by cutting it off, or by actions of Gordon Motta Clark, which separates the building. We have proposed to introduce such a crevasse, a crack, which divides the glacier into parts. So we decided to divide this building, to unite this building by division. So we introduced a big opening which separated two institutions, but connect them and offer a visual connection and also building up identity, as well as offering a space for interaction and communication, as well as for exhibitions, and a connection to the backyard public space on the backyard of the building, as well as enriching spatial conditions of the space. So this combination of tall and narrow spaces has enriched the overall offer of the spaces of the two institutions. And to us was interesting to see how in this simple structure we could find the room to express this diversity. And we try to preserve as much as possible of the existing structure. So for example, here you could see even the floor, this industrial floor with different stains. It's also supposed to be preserved in the white cube gallery. And that allowed us to build up new identity of the two institutions within one building by preserving the building as it is and revealing the beauty of this existing grid, facade grid, with the external relationship on the outside. So Temple Barn, it's a transformation of industrially produced shed in a community center. And here we were invited to help to transform already bought industrial shed into community center by one community in the mountains of Georgia. And it was interesting that we almost didn't have budget to work with this project, and but also choice due to a lack of accessible materials was very limited. And they just asked us, which color of the corrugated metal do we want, green or red? We say, let it be red. And then we looked at this building and realized it's a basilica. And so we decided to foster this comparison by the rose window in order to introduce the spatial drama and identity to the space. And then start to look further at the basilicas. And it's very interesting because basilica is actually a very efficient brick structure with a decorated, often only on one facade is decorated, covered by very, very thin layer of marble in order to provide this ornamentalization. So we thought, actually, back then it was efficient technology with a decoration. So if we would follow this logic of basilica, we also would keep contemporary technology of nowadays, which is industrial shed covered with corrugated metal, and just find a way for ornamentalization. So also in a very technological contemporary way. So that's what we did. We just thought, why not to paint it? And we did it. So we just proposed a recipe how to paint this cathedral in order to transform industrial shed into basilica, which was quite a surprisingly received by the many people around. Nevertheless, it was a very interesting project also to bond the community. So similar to Tom Sawyer, who offered to paint the fence, we have offered this community to paint these patterns on the facade. And by painting it, they actually gathered around. And when the community when it was finished, it was indeed quite surprising contrast with the context. But when it's opened its doors, it's immediately gathered the community around and become a very vivid and recognized space, which offered a roof for different types of the events, from different workshops and or grill parties, beautiful dinners, and again, workshops. And I will show now a series of small projects where we try to show, or we try to challenge ourselves how minimal could we be and how less could we do to create what we believe steel architecture is. And the first project is Tin Can Castle. It's a minimal living unit for the same community. So here we have tried to understand how you could build a minimal living module using the local accessible construction techniques. So like, for example, foundation out of tires, old tires, or for example, a stone on the roof, which actually prevents roof from being taken by the wind and therefore makes the structure cheaper and easier. And also using not qualified, or not very qualified construction workers to assemble such a structure. And to land such a module in the surround of the forest in order to reflect the lights and attract everyone who needs a home or shelter. In the other project, we try to understand how minimal the living at all could be. Do we every time need to build a house, or sometimes for such a community like a chapiteau, we could refer into its like traveling circus identity, offer just a circus tents, which could organize or transform a field into some kind of settlement and highlighting the identity of each of the members by this kind of colorful background, and also identifying the relationship of nature and human, again, by light and color, rather minimal means, I would have to say. And sometimes we also try to react on, for example, climatical challenges. Like in this project of urban rain in Basel, we try to understand how do we have to deal with constant heat in the cities, which are overall paved. And I believe you have experienced enough in Berlin last summer, what happens when the temperature goes above 30. And in Graz, for example, they use fire trucks for this. But apparently fire trucks has different meaning and probably not the most rational solution. So to us, it was interesting to see how we could build temporary installation, which could be assembled and disassembled in a rather fast way, also by using minimal means. So we have used only industrially produced, well, actually we just went to Obi and tried to find everything there. So we have assembled a series of these tripods, which would carry the watering system, industrial watering system, which would transform this lawn into a playground, offering refreshment and drops of water to overheated citizens. And as you could see, it works very simply. But what was very important to us, that it allows two things. On one hand, to water the ground and on the other hand, to provide more water in the air. So by cooling the air, then we use the same water to cool the ground. And then the same water was evaporating from the ground by really changing the microclimate over there. So apparently, I mean, it's good to state now when it's disassembled, but it was a really significant difference in the installation and nearby. And it became a quite a vivid public space over the day and in the evening and in the night. Villa Volatile. So that's another example how where we tried again with the minimal means, create a protection from sun or probably from rain, and also marking significance of the space by introducing the light. It was quite windy, so the light was constantly shaking, so we had to find a big stone to put it in between the lights so it provided more weight and in this case stabilize the light. And it was interesting how it also looks in the misty surrounding, and in the end it became a stage for performance. It was also interesting to see how the stand behaves on the air, and then marks the meaning of the whole gathering. And yeah, and there was a quite an interesting performance there afterwards. Petrichor. Actually, this installation was it was a competition for landscape park in Lausanne, which was mentioned in the introduction. And here we have chosen the site. In this idyllic surrounding, there was it is quite a dystopian site. So it's actually just a huge parking lot for trucks, which stays most of the time available, exactly depressive as it looks like. And to us, was interesting to understand what could be the parks of the future, or let's say of the future, which we hope will never come. Future of the broken climate, where even such as simple things like water, rain, and greenery wouldn't be accessible to all of us. So we have decided to work with a smell. Smell is such an interesting thing. It's actually the minor point of our perception, but because it's so minor and rare, the smell could address us to the deepest experience in our life. Through smell, you can unpack memories about your childhood, about some forgotten experience, something you think would never comes to your mind again. But by receiving the smell, we get access to absolute all memories which related to the smell. So we decided to work with the smell of fresh after rain water. So we worked with a artist called Tansky, who developed this type of smell, which called rain forest after the rain. So it's a special type of molecules which appeared when the wet ground get dry after the rain, and that's why it's so recognizable. So to us was interesting to introduce this smell and to see how it could be spread around through architectural installation. Of course, it should be also solar panel driven. And we install it as a tripods, as a certain stellas, which would organize this park around, and providing this dystopian context feeling of the fresh rainy day. And we decided to test this concept in the Biennale of Design in Zurich, where we have installed one of these prototypes, seeing how this box could change the perception of the surrounding through the smell, and well, change our understanding of the context and possible future. And of course, to us was very important to assemble this installation in such a way that we would be able to disassemble it without damaging the material. Digital totem, that was a set designed for the fashion show, where it was the first fashion show after COVID. So that moment where after all of us have been sitting for 1.5 years in front of screens, we finally went live. And it was very important to understand what is the screen or digital technologies means now, and digital and real. And so we have decided to speculate about it by installing this digital totem to understand what digital technologies could mean in a real world, and what analog world means on the screen. And that's the setting where the fashion show have taken the place. And again, the screen was kind of the symbol of this totem, the new god, the new connector with the reality. So it was a rather critical project which questioned what is actually real, what is the meaning of digital in real world, or how real digital world is, when sometimes something what happens distantly is much more important for us and present than things which happens right in front of our eyes. And therefore, to us, it was important to nail it to the ground, to the nature, to bring it with some basic manual solutions to connect, or let's say to fix this installation. As we see, not everyone is inspired with installation, and also with the screens like this model, which walks away. And yeah, so despite the meaning of the events which were announced over there, and to us was also interesting how with such a combination of screens, we could give different meaning to all of them, activating them all at the same time, or letting them fade away. And since we're in the walls of university, I would like also to share several teaching projects which we do in different universities. And I will start with a project which was driven by the industry of tourism. And mass tourism and cruise liners bring not only many happy people for one day to overdriven by tourism European capitals, but as well they generate a lot of liners for reuse. And we know in last Biennale in Venice, it was actually there was many works dedicated to this topic, but generally the other side of this tourism industry, where many of these tankers and boats have to be somehow reused, disassembled, and we know that many of them disassembled in the places under such a conditions which would never be allowed in the conditions under which we all would like to work. And nevertheless, probably there's no need to disassemble them completely. And because this building, okay, probably it cannot serve as a liner, but it could serve still as a house. It's a structure. And when we speak about housing shortage or absence of available materials, we cannot waste not only houses, existing structures, but we also should think about other elements of the industry. So we have dedicated this project to war crisis and refugees who flew from Ukraine, and there was also and still a shortage of housing. So we thought how, for example, this type of our world could serve for the purpose of housing people. So we have proposed to look at this as a structure which could still house people, and introduce several scenarios how we could integrate housing of different types and still see the existing structure not as something to disassemble and throw away, but as a valuable resource to actually satisfy current needs. The other series of projects is projects from TU Vienna, from the studio dedicated to transformation, which also called hardware software in architecture, and here we also call it a transformation of learning or learning transformations. So how could we transform an ugly house into active public center by introducing new scenarios of use, by revealing potential of diversity of different spaces with the different atmospheres and environments, also activating the spaces around to integrate it in the context, to integrate it in the use of the house, to allow the house to celebrate new life and new visitors. Or how can banal tower could be transformed in contemporary building, which again would offer diversity of uses for different social groups and remain to be a landmark in the context of the city. or how could we intensify use of the area, like this suburban project with a mono use mono use of the land. We could transform into diverse matrix of spaces and functions, which would offer diversity of uses and diversity of spatial conditions and environments, trying to understand what kind of functions could be fit in the different types of spaces and how they could be transformed and interchangeable depending on the differences of uses, offering new perspectives for this type of uses, and setting different connections of different functions. Again, revealing the potential of spaces in between and in between conditions, which could be seen not as a buffer spaces, but actively used spaces which allow to enrich use and intensity of any space. Or how could Silo Tower be used and changed for another purposes, for civic purposes, for example, and this transformation of the tower, which could allow us to integrate different uses of different type and different scale, while still keeping it open for future transformation and future adjustment. So to us was very important here to see the structure not as a complete project, but as something what could be constantly developed further and changed. And I would finish this presentation with two other projects which we have done. So in the project of Airbox Sports Center, we wanted to bring drive of suburbs in the surrounding of Central Park. So we have looked at the suburbs and the symbol of suburbs, and which is billboard, and it was very interesting to recognize the meaning of billboard as actually very efficient structure, as a minimal representation of maximum of information. It's absolute economical minimum to explain, to deliver, to promote maximum of information. So to us was interesting to transform the building in this kind of open frame structure, but also transform building into infrastructure, which could offer different types of uses and as well orient itself differently to different side of the site. So this open frame structure activated each of the side of the site. And here we could see the main entrance and this kind of billboard site, which indicates the main entrance. We could see how greenery grows through this kind of lounge side, organizing facilities for seating and the shade. The shadow generally played a very important role in this project. To us, was very interesting to see how present the shadow could be. And sometimes when we discussed about this project and blurring the borders in between indoor and outdoor, it was interesting to discuss where actually the border or the presence of the building begins. Is it the heated volume, the glass facade, or is it the structure, the open structure, or is it, for example, the red pavement, or is it the shadow? That was on the other side of the building. We have organized the sport facilities, and one of the important principles of the building was so-called naked building. So to us was very important to introduce, to reveal, to make accessible, visually accessible these areas of the buildings which normally get hidden from the external view. And I'm speaking here about technical rooms which are revealed on the main facade, or the storage of the sport equipment also revealed. And transparency and connection with the outside was very important quality. So how the inside also connected with the outside, and how the park, for example, gets inside the building. And the only permanent color-wise element of the building was utility core, which remained the same during all seasons of the year, despite what we cannot say about the other side of the other parts of the building, which were changing according to the different seasons of the year, different lighting conditions from the inside as well as from the outside. That was the opening of the building. Fireworks was done by someone else, and we just caught the right moment to take a beautiful photo. Emma, it's transformation of industrial area into cultural cluster, and here to us was important to create abstract but bright and memorable background, which would allow, which could serve as a good environment for events of different type, like academical lectures or wild rave parties. And due to limitation of budget, we have decided to work only with the surface of the facade. So we propose to use unconventional material to create such a to create unconventional appearance of such a facade, and we propose such a detail in order to create this a bit of absurd environment and of a strange combination of a set design and a bit decoration to this kind of dystopian movies. And the other important element to us, source of inspiration to us, was trolley cables. And we decided, we got inspiration there, and we decided to introduce a suspended net, which would actually change the perception of the site. So it would allow to transform this outdoor space in a more indoor atmosphere, in a more dimensional atmosphere. So we introduced lights and loudspeakers over there, as well as mirrors to make it more shiny. And one of the most prominent elements, it was this white disc. And apart from this visual aesthetical role, it's also played very important functional role to abstract the building behind and kind of to help us to complete, to enclose this atmosphere of the space. And it was used also as a media screen and became kind of place of gathering, one of the most central elements due to its abstractness and symbolic meaning. And also, of course, scale played important role. So this 9-meter in diameter disc, we have decided to color with a paint which is normally used for the road construction, and this special paint allowed to transform it in really abstract surface, which was attracting all the phone cameras. And yeah, it was thousands of images taken of this disc, and which also helped to transform this space in a kind of alternative, a bit of magic place. But the most important part of this place, there were of course visitors who have received these rescue blankets by the entry in the space, and by carrying these blankets, visitors they transformed actually from observers into the actors of the space. So just by moving to the space with the particular blankets, they become the one who create the atmosphere and the design of the space. Thank you very much. How do we go further?
Yeah, I will lead us all through it. Thank you, first of all. Now begins the second part of the evening, which is the discussion round. And as per our tradition, this is started by a couple of students from our first year who have already prepared some questions for you. And then after that, anybody here or online who would like to also ask some questions, you are free to just raise your hand, and then we will pass the microphone around. So I will, yeah. Great, thank you.
Yeah, okay. Thank you for the lecture. It was really interesting. I am curious about, could you introduce your team? Are you all architects? What's your backgrounds? How many you are? How do you work together as a team, or does everybody have an assigned role?
Thank you for the question. Difficult to reply. Because it's very fluid. I think most of us are architects. How do we work? Hard. We work very hard together. I mean, not together, but generally hard. we don't have only architects, so well, generally meaning of team, just like also like half the projects which I've showed today, and probably even more, which I didn't show, we do also in collaboration with different offices, and every time trying to collaborate with someone who possesses particular expertise in a particular field, and it could be a philosopher, an artist, I don't know, structural engineer, or I don't know, like artist of the perfumes or artist of graphics, like for example, for we have a particular type of style and visualizations and this kind of hand-drawn visualization. So it's actually my brother, he's an artist, and we collaborate with him on this project, on this type of projects. But mostly our team is architects, obviously. With some of them we work permanently, with some of them we collaborate eventually for particular projects. What we try to have, or at least what I want to believe we try to achieve in the team, we try to keep the dialogue as open as possible, and we try to give a chance to everyone to participate on an equal manner into the projects, coming up with ideas and concept and proposals. And I believe it's the most fruitful and actually right way of working together. First of all, practically speaking, because people much more excited to develop their own ideas, or at least like partially theirs, and as well as to us, that's exactly the point of collaboration, that we all involved, we all create this, and I don't know what else to add. Did I reply the question or?
Right, then I will hand the microphone over to you.
So I have a question about the UDK, because we are in the UDK, and so it's like a lot about art. And so I think, and my question is like, should an architect definitely have a knowledge in arts to become a good architect? Like, is it very close together? Because you did like many projects in arts too, sorry.
Generally, architects should have a lot of knowledge about all spheres of life, as well as art. As well as artists should have a lot of knowledge about all spheres of life to be good artist. So knowledge is not something what can damage you. It's usually, I mean, it's good sometimes to be able to release yourself from knowledge, but of course, like, well, it's, so you're the first year student, right? Don't be afraid of knowledge. It only helps.
I guess in the very same vein, this was not what I was planning to ask, but I think now it's kind of appropriate, just if you have any advice, like either personally or from a perspective of an experienced architect, to aspiring architects, and like what kind of like what you could give us for the future for our professional lives, if we want to aspire to do something instant, like that you would consider great.
So the question, the advice for the future, or
advice for young architects, or
advice for young architects. Well, I inspiring architects. Sorry, I didn't understand.
Aspiring. So
okay. I think obviously we are now at the moment of change. The change is quite drastic. I don't know, like, if at all we sometimes have experienced such a drastic conditions in like conscious changes in our life, and many things which we teach, we probably teach wrong. Many things which we believe in wrong things. It does mean that everything what's said, it's stupid or doesn't deserve to be observed, but it does think that you have to be much more conscious about your own role in the future, and much more reflective to everything what's going on around. And the more knowledge you have, the better you could understand the situation, the faster you can react. I think we're at the moment where almost no one can say, how should we teach architecture and what architecture at all should be? I mean, I spoke today about the meaning of management, curation of the resources. We didn't yet touch, because of the time, a very important role, for example, of technologies or IE in architecture, which role apparently human at all will take in the understanding, evaluation of the potential. Many things will get obsolete within several days and or weeks. And I think the main advice would be, again, to be, first of all, very sensitive and reflective to everything what's going on, very open and very knowledgeable. I struggle to get more precise instructions, but I think it's important to be honest about the complexity of the situation.
Answer your question. Okay, good.
Thank you. I have a specific question about the work with smells, like you did in that park. Would you say it's a remedy for the place, or it's a general critique? Like, with what kind of feeling would you like the visitors to leave? Like with enrichment or loss, or like what kind of message was behind it? I was curious.
Well, I spoke about memories. We started about memories. Memory is like the greatest storage of your emotions. Park or art exhibition, it's a place where we try to recharge our emotions. Almost all the experiences we perceive through the lens of already received ones. So we hope that it could unpack certain hidden memory or knowledge which could enrich you or like help you to re-understand, re-evaluate the current condition, probably give you better understanding of the future steps. I think it's very dangerous to stuck in the past, but it's even more dangerous to forget the past. So that was as the shaky structure which actually holded this smell distributors. It's the same about this, how to find this balance in between your emotions and in between your sensations and understanding of past and the future. Well, this shouldn't be a direct answer. It's about, again, reflection. It's something what just helps to activate your reflectors.
Yeah, you're definitely not a conservative or traditional architect in the sense of placing a potent block of cement somewhere in a city or in a big place. So you're working with a lot of light structures and industrial light elements, kind of, and you have this interesting twist of putting kind of, or emphasizing regional somehow, like, or cultural yeah. And I was just wondering what your kind of language, like what is your goal, what do you want to tell with your architecture, and why is it important and maybe going this alternative direction or different direction?
Well, thanks for the question. It's important to ask yourself this question all the time. I think I will be the most honest if I will say that we don't focus on this question so much, so we not every time asking ourselves what do we want to say or what do we, so we somehow we don't try to be very hygienic about, let's say, visual or technological representation of our office, and we probably not so much focus on the coherency of our work. To us, it's more important to work with a particular situation and particular project to see what would be the most important or the most sharp answer in this particular situation. And sharpness of this answer also, of course, like we try to challenge conventional meaning of such an answer. So in the world where everything changes too fast, we start to mention that temporary solutions could be much more important than permanent solutions. And they could be also, it's something what you could build fast, but also fast, disassemble fast. On the other hand, I also I got to admit that our background actually came from temporary installations and temporary pavilions. We built like all our first projects they were temporary. So probably it's something what also influenced our work. On the other hand, we do love these temporary structures because that helps you very fast solve particular problem. And also what we know from the architecture, from the permanent architecture, that it never so permanent. It's usually gets obsolete through the process of design and constructions, and starts process and actually the day of opening is the first day of adjustment. So the time changes faster than the concrete gets hard. So in a very particular typologies, you actually need permanent architecture and permanent solutions. So this time extent in architecture is crucial. We have to understand that architecture is not a project. It is a process. It's a process of creation, adjustment, and enhancement of built environment, of facilities. And this ability of any environment to change according to new needs, new challenges is a key, not only for sustainable architecture, but generally for architecture. More than that, architecture through the history was rarely built at once. And also in such a scales, it was every time overlay of different layers which were slightly changed, slightly adjusted with each generation, with each new user. So it's very important to understand this temporality in architecture. Okay, as well, we actually have a book which called Contemporary Architecture, and in the word contemporary we cross out con and left temporary, and in the word architecture where archi is main or author and texture is builder or structure, we cross out archi and left texture. So in contemporary architecture we left temporary texture. So it's what about what contemporary architecture can learn from temporary structures. So it's actually the whole book. We try to explain why is it so important to look more precise at something what is completely eliminated from architectural discourse, and we speak about temporary structures, scaffoldings, some temporary solutions, because actually there are some interesting findings that apparently architecture is very conservative. It every time goes beyond technological progress, and we struggle, for example, to just to manifest technologies. We really need long time to accept the appearance of technologies, and I don't know, materials. Look at all artificial materials. They fake natural stone and wood without actually expressing beautiful fiber structure, which would be very fair, just because we have to comply with a certain conventional requirements and understanding of beauty. Everything truly new looks ugly because we're just not ready to accept this, because we need every time to refer to certain memories, to recognize this as a safe place, because safety is based on the understanding of the place. As soon as you understand the place, you understand how it works, you, whew, I feel safe now. And as soon as you experience something new, it looks dangerous, and therefore to us it's we even new technology, with the new technologies we try to fake kind of conventionally recognized materials or spaces. It's a good example with food. Every new food, what you try really new, you're like, what's that? But after 10 times, like, yeah. So that's the way how we accept things, and well, how we came to food from temporary structures. But what I want to say, it's really important to understand temporariness and the temporary solution as an efficient solution to any extent.
Yeah, Artem, thank you for the lecture. Actually, I would like to refer exactly to this research lecture. And as I remember correctly, the main, let's say, point was radicality of these undesigned structures, because you can be much more playful with colors, with materialities, with elements. It's less conventional. And you didn't show urban designs of your office, but as I remember correctly, there are a couple of them. And could you reveal, is it possible to use the same methodology of radicality and temporality in urban design, or it's totally a different thing for you?
Okay, there are two questions, or let's say one notion about this book. I think it wasn't about radicality, it was about the logic of material, and it was about how by following very clear practical logic you could be far more innovative and radical. And and about urban design, it's actually the same logic, how by addressing the actual challenges of urban design you could be quite radical and well, it's now without examples, it's difficult to state anything. I didn't show because it's 40 minutes, and usually we try to focus lectures on something, not just to show our portfolio, but to particular topic. And here we want to speak about curation, first of all, of materials, not even spaces, but yes, in urban design, we very often work with the temporary use, with the regimes of use, with intensification of use, how the same place could work 24 hours, 7 days a week, how you could share different actions in time and offer the same space for different users, which first of all also could be seen not only as intensification and enrichment, let's say, of a social environment of the space, but also the space to reduce the amount of demanded resources, just because very rough and wrong example, but it gives probably illustrates good what I mean. It's, for example, about office building, and if office building works 8 hours a day, that means 40 hours a week. In a week we have 36, I think, hours or something like that. So it shows like that actually office building, huge structure, normally occupied only 30%, less than 30% of its time. So if we'd imagine what we could do other 70%, how we could use these spaces efficiently, the city will be 70% smaller, 70% more intense. We would require less material for the buildings, less material for the roads, less material for the communications, less energy to heat, to lit, and so on. So it's a very important thing how to learn how to intensify use of urban fabric, for example. I think there wasn't a real answer, but it was more a comment. Or should I be more specific, or are you satisfied with the? Okay.
Maybe I am allowed to shoot a little question as well, because you spoke a couple of times about memory. And I was just wondering, is there a spatial or architectural memory that you have that sometimes plops up again and again in your design process?
Well, to be honest, I'm very unprepared to such a question. I actually even didn't know. I actually even didn't know why I spoke so much today about memory. Particular memory, which comes. I think what would be interesting now to say, not just to share like some kind of personal experience, which I could, but I don't think it will enrich your kind of understanding of architecture. I think memory and a general experience of architecture is very important to us to imagine, to try to foresee like the result of our interventions, and it's just very important that we have we are lucky to be able to travel and to be surrounded by some diverse spatial conditions and general like environments. So it's very important whenever you design something to refer to particular memory, how this exactly could look like. Most likely you never find a particular example. I don't know if you imagine, I don't know, big roof with a small windows, but you could every time destructure or fragment your design and particularly imagine how this works, how that works, how that works. It could be system of circulation, color, lighting conditions, and so on. So it's actually what is great nowadays that, I mean, probably it was every time like this, but the most innovative design could consist of very simple elements which you all could go and check and experience somewhere or just take out from your memory. So I think it's the experiences, our personal experience is very important base for the design. So this ability to defragment your ideas and learn and check them like in a mock-up in existing, in built spaces, I think it's very important. But probably you were expecting something different when I spoke about memory, no?
I think expectation and memory are somewhat closely related in that they don't have to align, so it's fine. Does anybody else have a further question? Oh, so many. Okay, we start to the front.
Hi. You mentioned that a lot of your projects were restricted by budget. Would you build differently if you had more money available, or?
On my experience, there is never more money available. Whenever someone says budget is really not a question here, it only comes to the moment they see the budget. So there's no unlimited budget really, but it's not about how much money your client or yourself have. It's like your position. Budget, it represents the amount of resources which you consume. Budget is not only working hours, it's amount of resources constructed, it's the delivery. Budget could be actually easily translated to CO2. You as an architect, you need a challenge. I mean, it's the most disarming conditions when you say, do whatever you want, just be happy. It's like, what should I do now? It's absolutely, it's very difficult. And I think any architect, any architecture actually tries to solve something any architects try to solve something with his her architecture. It could be, I don't know, political situation, problem of, I don't know, formal problem, theoretical problem. So we all try to speculate about some kind of problem. It's almost impossible to produce design without actually agenda. I mean, architecture appeared from practical problems. So primitive hut is the idea how to shed the water. So that was practical problem. With a more complex development of architecture, we were like kind of bored to just shed the water. So we start to speculate about beauty and proportions, and then after beauty and proportions we decide to speculate about more complex philosophical things, sometimes which brought us further from the actual purpose of shedding the water. So architecture doesn't exist without, it's every time, it's not well, here it's interesting to say it's not art. Architecture, if it's art of construction, the way architecture is the method of construction. If you want to create the design, if you want to create architecture, you design the way it's built, and you build in something what has a particular purpose. Otherwise, it's a monument, is a statement, so which is also have either a symbolic or political or artistic expression of purpose. But I think it's just, there's no architecture without agenda, without limitations, and this limitation could be ideological, aesthetical, budget, and it's all defines the focus of the architect. Did I reply? Is clear? No, but what do you want to say? What do you want to ask?
No, I was just, no, I think, thank you for the answer, but exactly, like, I think, okay, you always have these limitations in architecture, and you as an office, you would, or yeah, maybe the question was, would you set the same limits even though you had more money available? But as I understood,
it was the first sentence of my my answer.
Exactly. Yeah, maybe you probably answered well.
Yes, we probably would in different way, but definitely. So I mean, we would set the same. I think we would keep stick to this agenda because it's very important as an architect to be responsible for the resources, to manage to curate these resources right, and for each purpose you have to understand. Like you have to set the right balance of these resources, and if you can consume, it does mean that you should consume.
Perhaps. Oh, now we have a lot more. Okay, 2 last questions, you and you. Okay.
So I wanted to ask a question about your process. Does it start, well, I guess it's different within different projects, but how do you go about it? Do you start with what message you want to convey, or do you start with the form, the material, and also how important is the response to your projects? What happens after the construction?
Okay, several things. How do we start the design and then response to main things? So how do we start the design? Generally, the design starts from understanding of basic values, like what's important for the program, what's important for the site, what's important for the user. So we try to develop these principal elements, principal qualities, which we try to achieve. Then we try to concept is a configuration of these values within particular limitations, external limitations like site, budget, I don't know, time frame, particularity of use, and that's kind of the main thing. So to understand the values, what's important to achieve, and to understand how to bring them together in the most efficient or interesting way. I think to us during design process, what we try to do, we try not to get bored, and but it's actually not so difficult as soon as you have certain narrative which you want to achieve, because that's, I think, the most interesting in architecture, that you constantly try to reinvent, to find a place for improvement, to make it a bit better, and suffer from this, and therefore enjoy it. And here comes the response, that any project is an assumption, like Stuart Brown said. Any project is an experiment. Each experiment fails. So not all the time, not in all the extent. So we also have to agree on the evaluation of the results of the experiments, which outcomes would be recognized as fail or as a success. But it's every time interesting to see how it actually works, because of course project is a proposal for configuration of the future. We just construct it in our head, how it could possibly look like, and this configuration based on our experiences, so what we have seen, how it could work. But sometimes it doesn't work like this. Also, it depends on the expertise which you possess. Like as a young architect, you probably focus on several aspects. As more experienced, you then know inevitably comes this, which is none of young architects normally think about, but it's actually very important for the design. So you, with each experience, you collect more and more, let's say, types of question which you would have to reply in the design. Sometimes they absolutely, or let's say limitations, which they could be absolutely non-architectural. So of course to us it's like to revisit the design post-evaluation of the construction is a key thing to progress. So it's probably again to reflection, that to reflect not only on generally what's going on, but what you have done. It's very important to reflect, collect, understand, and and try to improve.
You started a lecture with an image of the ideal city, and you said that what's missing are the traces of time and the context that we can't. And I find it one of the most exciting things about architecture, trying to read the traces of urban fabric of different times, and introducing this concept of temporary architecture. What would you say would be the added layer of this modern generation of architects, or like how would you reflect on this? That will there be any added layer if everything will be disassembled in the end, or maybe that's just an ego issue and we shouldn't think about making something longer than our lives?
Well, that's a very interesting question. which I actually never thought about. What will happen after us? Nothing will happen. I mean, we have several projects which were disassembled and nothing was like left, and that's it, which is also great. The other thing which probably important is your cultural impact. And what for example, we tried slightly to touch in this project of digital totem, where how real digital is, how digital real is. So like most of the projects which you have seen, I think closer to 100%, you've never visited in real because you've seen them digitally. So our actually visual environment formed by the places which we have never been, probably most of us will never happen to be. So it's as well like what is the purpose of the project. In architecture, there are probably an ambitious architecture. There are two main purposes. One, to improve this, or like let's say to deliver the required functionality, and the other, leave a trace in history. And then if the second one is your, let's say, intellectual impact, it absolutely doesn't matter if it's temporary or permanent. On the other hand, I don't know, like it's very interesting, this overlay of layers, but not all the layers deserve to be preserved and overlaid. But I think we live in such a drastic environmental conditions, which allows, as I said at the very beginning, to rethink and re-understand everything of what we're doing. So I wouldn't be really hurt to understand that we didn't leave any kind of damage with our design. So it's interesting overlay, but it happens without us. I mean, probably then. Well, it's very interesting question actually, because we usually speak about these traces which we leave, or impact of architecture as a negative thing of impact, but also like cultural impact or cultural layer. It's a very interesting thing. I don't have really an answer, but I think if you don't leave the trace, it's also fine. Like, I mean, if you remember great theoreticals like Cedric Price, for example, one of the most influential architects, like still till now, which actually didn't build anything.
I think we could maybe round up now, since it's beginning to get even darker, and we're getting hungry. Thank you for also answering all of the questions. Thank you for asking them. Thank you for the lecture. Thank you for being here. Just a quick reminder for next week, we have Ikonen, which is going to be a book presentation by the chair of Design and Construction by Bettina Götz. And we will have 3 guests, which is going to be exciting. 2 Viennese artists, Christoph Meyer and Ute Müller, as well as a Berlin-based architect, Frank Schönert, whom some of us who've been at the university a bit longer might still know. So yeah, it will be great to see you again here next week or online. And I would probably just end with thank you. See you next time.
Thank you.